Right then guys, just before we get going into the video, just wanted to share with you some statistics. Last month I had 17.1 thousand views. Well, for the last 28 days this is 17.1 thousand views, and thank you to all of those who watch. It is really appreciated. But only 1.5% of you are actually subscribed to the channel. So if you wouldn't mind, just give it a quick click. It doesn't cost you anything and it helps me out massively. Enjoy the video. Hi there guys, and welcome back to the channel. I do apologise if you get much of the road noise because I am on a very busy main road here. This is obviously my new showroom, my new site. See all the cars and everything like that. But the one that I'm going to talk about today is this one. And you might be thinking, my goodness, what on earth has he done? But this one here is my new Land Rover Defender. It's what I'm going to be using as a daily, really. Not that I necessarily have to, but it's one that I've chosen to, and it was more an itch that I had to scratch as well. And I mean, you might recognise the roof tent on the top if you've been on the channel previously. I had a Range Rover Sport, one much like the one that I'm stood next to here. Absolutely loved it, but decided that I wanted to explore this option. Something that Sophie, my other half, she's also been wanting to do as well. Fortunately, being in the trade, I've got various different contacts and I was offered various different Land Rover Defenders. Took a little bit of time choosing, but not too much time, because sometimes I find if you get into it too much, you'll never make a decision. And it was between this one and another one. The other one was a silver Land Rover Defender 110 XS 2.4 TDCi, very much what this one here is as well, with the 6-speed manual box. That one was completely untouched in terms of modifications, very much a standard car, had a great service history and everything like that. Possibly the one that I should have chosen. This one was more of a heart overhead scenario, and I think what did it more so than anything genuinely was the colour. Because if I turn it around here, obviously it's in that dark and metallic green, and you'll notice that's also the colour of my company logo. The big wheels and the wide arch body kit and everything like that, that was already on there. The snorkel and the roof rack, again, already on there. Also got these like smoke indicator lenses and the smoke lenses on the back. Tread plate was already on there. So it's had a few of the external mods done, not what I've done, although I do quite like them. And it also, these side steps that are on there are brand new. They're very much the same style as the ones that was on there, but they were completely rotten through, so decided that I wanted to replace those. The chassis and everything that I could see, obviously when I went to go and look at this, all very, very clean, especially for its age and the mileage and everything like that. Bulkhead, again, very clean. The step ladder, I've repainted parts of it because the rust was starting to come through on that. And the roof rack is also starting to show some rust. It's all very solid and structural, but in terms of just the appearance, a little bit tatty. Looks far better now that I've done the side steps too. And I'll show you the bulkhead. So as previously mentioned, it's very similar to the silver one in the sense that it is the 2.4 TDCi Ford engine in it. It's got 6-speed manual, and because it's the XS, I'll show you the inside. It has these half leather seats as standard, heated seats, and also my most important requirement when choosing this Defender was the air conditioning. There are some cosmetic bits which I need to go around, it doesn't affect it, but that gear stick's obviously all a bit chewed up, and the carpet there is not in the best. The silver one, as I say, was pretty damn clean. Another thing I have done is this steering wheel here. So as much as this is a new car to me, and it's certainly a new car to the channel, I've actually had it for a little while, and I'll explain through exactly why it's taken a little bit of time to get it onto the channel. But all in all, this is my new Land Rover Defender. As I say, I had a Range Rover Sport, very much like this one here, and I've chopped it in, well, I've traded that out, and bought myself this instead. And when choosing it, as I say, this green really did entice me. A few of the mods and stuff I thought it looked quite cool. I don't think it really matters whether you're into Land Rovers or not. When you see cool looking Land Rover Defenders, that's a different story. And then on the drive home, that's when I asked myself the question, my goodness, what have I got myself into? and I'll explain as to why. Right then, so to give it a little bit more context, I've had my Land Rover Defender since May of this year, 2023, and we're now at the start of October. So obviously, as you can see, there's a few months of owning the vehicle, and it's only realistically now come through that there's what it needs to be. So started my journey back. I bought this from a private chap in Plymouth. I don't mind private sales. It was how I started out a lot of the time, was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace, trying to find cars at a decent price, and having conversations with the owners and buying them. So it's something I've done many times. Obviously always do your checks that you can, MOT histories, HPIs, everything like that, making sure that it's what it needs to be. But at the end of the day, it's a punt that you're going to take, isn't it? It's one of those where you kind of put your money where your mouth is. It's a bit of a risk, but we do what we can and hope that it works out. Joining onto a bit of traffic here. So yeah, the silver one I should mention, which, as I say, is maybe the one I should have bought, but that one there was from a trader who had spent a bit of money on it to make it retail ready. He offered that to me at £18,000. Didn't have any of the mods. It was box standard. Didn't have the side steps even. Had the tow bar on the back, but again they all kind of came with that as standard. But didn't have any snorkel, didn't have any big tyres, big wheels, spacers, roof rack, any of that. So that was offered at £18,000, and I've been talking to the chap. He'd had this on Marketplace for a little while, been in conversations. He was sending me through the service histories and everything like that, and again that was also £18,000. But that, not that you have much to go back on a trader, but having been in the trade and you want to build a reputation, you don't really want to sell things that you shouldn't be selling. And the honest truth is, I don't know whether the chap in Plymouth kind of knew the work that needed to be done on this one either. So certainly don't hold it against anyone. Part of the game, you pay your money, you take your chance. So went down to Plymouth, got a lift down with my brother. So yeah, went down to Plymouth, had a good look around it, had a look at the service histories and stuff like that. Took it around the block very briefly, but paid him the money. And obviously I don't think, especially when it comes to buying from private, you should go back to them, so you take your chance. So driving home, going on a dual carriageway is when I started to realise that maybe it wasn't what it kind of hyped up to be, because I was going along and I could hear this horrible whine coming from this central part of the car, and it's like a bearing noise, definitely. And then when you dip the clutch, that noise went away, and then when you come back in, it was there again. But this had recently had a clutch put in, so I thought, well, that's a strange noise to have. And I'm still definitely learning about Land Rover Defenders. I've driven a few of them previously, had one come in part exchange, which I then sold on again, sold them at previous places I've worked. But yeah, not really had too much of a mechanical experience with them. But fortunately, the chap that I use for my mechanical work now, he's Land Rover mad. He's got various different Defenders himself, and he's got real old ones to relatively newish ones. Well, not new shape, but new ones in these instances. So he's Land Rover mad. And so yeah, I was driving around for a couple of days with this whining, bearing noise. It seemed to perform okay, and I wasn't doing any kind of big journeys with it. But then I was starting to go up a few hills and bits and pieces, because I live in Devon, there's always hills everywhere. And the car started to massively overheat, and I'm thinking, oh God, like what could this be? So the point where I had to pull over, you open the bonnet and it's all coming out of the expansion tank. It is just, under all the pressure, it's just hissing, and I'm thinking, great, this is not a good start. Because these 2.4 TDCi engines, you haven't got to look very far, especially in the world wide web that we all love. You haven't got to look very far to find out that they quite often have issues. It could be something really minor, but it could also be something really quite major, such as head gasket jobs and having to take the head off, get them re-skimmed and all of that. And I'm thinking, what is it that I've got myself into on this instance? So yeah, had a couple of issues starting to kind of show, and again, not sure whether he knew about it. He might have known about them. If he did, more for me, because I'm the one who gave him the £18,000. So yeah, I managed to get it straight into Matt, but Matt couldn't work on it straight away, because well, partly my fault. I kept giving him other stock cars to prep and everything like that, but it got to the point where I says, right, you really need to kind of get onto my Defender. I'll stop giving you work so you can focus on it. And then he decided that he was going to take it for a drive, see what he thought it was. The whining coming from this area of the car was really quite prominent, as I say. He kind of didn't have to go very far to realise what it was. It was the transfer box down below. So you've got engine, gearbox, and then transfer box, which then puts the power to obviously all four corners. It is a permanent four-wheel drive. And as he was taking it apart, he says, I've never seen one this bad. It was really bad. There were so many metal filings sticking to the sump plug. It was low on oil anyway. There's these kind of sacrificial plates that go in on either corner, and they were just non-existent. So yeah, the transfer box was in a real bad way. But fortunately, I got a rebuild kit from a company called Ashcroft Transmissions. Had that sent directly to Matt, and I said to him, look, whilst you've got it, I want you to kind of go through the whole of the underside and let me know what else you think could do with changing. And again, didn't have to look very far before he found a few bits, but I knew what I'd get myself into with a Land Rover Defender, and there are people that run them on a shoestring budget and don't necessarily do things when they supposedly needed to be done. But he also said, look, I know when you change it into gear and put it into reverse, you get this horrible clunk coming from the rear. And I thought, well, that's just Land Rover Defenders, isn't it? But apparently not. So it's had new UJs in the prop shafts. It's had new rear half shafts. But again, I think, well, they're an upgraded bit because they've almost superseded what was there previously. And to cut a very long story short, what was there previously were two separate components. You had a shaft going into a hub housing, as against now that is just one solid piece. So there isn't that bit to wear out. So it's quite a common upgrade that a lot of people do, and I thought, well, yeah, let's do that. The rear dick was also weeping. It wasn't leaking as in leaving marks on the floor or anything like that, but it was certainly weeping. So I had the pinion seal done. As I've already mentioned, the side steps, they're brand new because the old ones were just rotten through. And I also asked them to just check everything out in terms of engine compartment and everything like that. That all seemed to be okay, but we changed the thermostat because we reckoned that was what the cause of the overheating side of things. So did a full coolant flush through. Radiator seemed okay, so did that. Flushed through the coolant, topped it all up, put a new cap on. Good. Right, so then got it back after, as I say, that was about 6 weeks, but I did keep piling it on him. It's not 6 weeks worth of work, but it took about that long. And he also put in some battery cables from the base of the seat. Here is where the battery's stored. So they now go to the back chassis of the car. And the reason for that is because on my trailer, I've got an electric winch with battery cables and Anderson connectors already on there. So it made sense to do that because when I need to use the winch on the trailer, I can plug it into the back of my Defender and then have the full winch control. I haven't got to lug around any kind of battery for it or anything like that. And yeah, so that worked out really well. That was something else I asked him to do. So that was good. And then, yeah, so had it back, started driving it around for a few more days. It drove infinitely better. The gearbox and everything was much tighter. It was much quieter to drive. I mean, as quiet as a Defender can be. And so, yeah, it's just really, really good. And then started to do a bit of towing work, just staying local, because obviously that's what I need to do. But then started to go a little bit further afield with it. And lo and behold, temperature gauge started climbing again. And I was thinking, bloody hell, here we go again. So managed to get it back into Matt. He managed to look at it relatively quickly, but he says, I cannot see anything that's causing this to overheat in any kind of dramatic fashion. There was no, you couldn't find, because normally you can trace a leak. The coolant leaves a bit of a stain, you can trace the leak and everything like that, and couldn't really find it. And I thought, well, there must be something. So in the end, he says, right, okay, I'm going to run the engine and just kind of stare at it, see what I can find, see what I can do. And then fortunately, or unfortunately, no, fortunately, he managed to find it was actually the cap on the expansion tank. We just got a generic one from a parts supplier. All seemed to be fine, but it was actually leaking out of that expansion tank, and it was a bit of a relief because I thought, well, I've just spent a huge amount of money having everything rebuilt and redone underside, so that was a bit of a relief. and then since then it's all been okay. But in terms of the costings, when I first bought it, so it was £18,000 for the Land Rover itself. It was probably another 700, probably another £1,000 in parts by the time it's had the transfer box rebuild, the steps and everything like that. Probably about £1,000 in parts, and then probably about £800 in labour. So that is near enough an additional 1,800 quid on top of the 18 grand that I've spent. And to obviously have it in the garage, which you don't necessarily want. You want to buy a new car and then drive it. But touch wood, everything seems fine now. I hope I haven't just jinxed it by doing this video. But everything seems okay now. And it's a much more pleasant drive than it was when I first got it. But obviously it still drives like a Land Rover Defender. There is almost like a learning curve you have to take when you get one of these cars. Don't expect to go fast anywhere at all for any reason. You can expect to kind of do the towing work really well, but I wouldn't say it was towing any better than what my Range Rover was, because that was a fantastic tow car, there's no doubt about that. I really enjoyed having it, and perhaps it was even a bit easier because that was an automatic. This obviously is a manual, but it does the tow work very well. I do enjoy driving it around the lanes and stuff that I've got here. I tend to win most of the battles of who's going to reverse, because it is obviously quite a bit of a big car and a bit of a beast. Visibility, believe it or not, although the windscreen is quite narrow, and because it is so boxy, you kind of see all corners of the car, so you know roughly where you can be. So yeah, for whatever reason, I enjoy driving this. It feels like you could be driving, other than the air conditioning and these XS seats, you could take a Defender from a D-Reg right up until this one, probably up until 2016, and they all drive much the same. I think that's some of the appeal, isn't it? Like you know what it is that you're getting into. The XS is almost like their better spec of the car, because it does have that air conditioning and the heated seats, which again was one of my requirements. I thought if I'm going to do this, I at least want the aircon so that when it is really hot, on the very few days that it is hot, I can be cool. So yeah, very pleased that I've got the XS. The 2.4 engine seems to be a bit more civilised with that 6-speed gearbox. On the dual carriageway and the motorway runs, it feels a bit better. It's also a little bit more economic, but it's not an economical car at all. There's just something about it. I could drive any of the cars I have on the forecourt, and I still gravitate towards this one. I don't know why. I'm not sure what it is. I'm sure a lot of other Land Rover owners will feel very much the same thing. Oh, let this bike come through. A lot of other Land Rover owners feel the same thing. Not sure what it is about these cars. I've got my old S-Class, which perhaps is the better daily car, because it's a nice automatic, very, very comfortable, very, very quiet, because it's an S-Class, got all the double glazing windows and everything going all through it. So it's very quiet in the cabin, and I still gravitate towards this. I think it's because it's a bit more of an engaging drive. You don't tend to do the motorway routes, you tend to go the more scenic routes or through country lanes, especially within Devon. For example, we took it up to North Devon a couple of weekends ago after I'd had everything done, and rather than going up the motorway and then turning left, so pretty much up to junction 27, turn left, and then you're on A roads all the way through to kind of Barnstable area, we decided we'd kind of go up through all the country lanes, Morton Hampstead and everything like that, and I thought it was a much more pleasant way of doing the road trip. It is a bit more of a road trip when you do it, and you're certainly doing a lot more driving. There's a lot more gear changes and a lot more twisty turns and everything like that, but I enjoyed it. I thought, well, I'm not in any rush to get there. You see a bit more of the countryside and everything like that. There's definitely a knack to driving these cars. As I say, you're not going to get anywhere quickly. The rev range seems to be between like 1600 revs and 3000 revs, which obviously isn't a massive rev range. Anything either side of that's pretty pointless. Dials are very basic. I can't even, like, you have to work out your own MPG. It doesn't tell me MPG. And again, this is supposedly one of the more modern era Defenders. This I had done, this top open bit here. What was there beforehand was just a bit of plywood, really, with some rubbish fabric on it. This I got from eBay. It's a handmade one apparently, and you could choose the different trims that you wanted. I wanted this one because it's the XS trim, which so it goes well with the seats, which I thought was quite cool. As I say, I changed the steering wheel in this one because the original one, it's almost like you're driving a ship. It's really quite big and clumsy. This is a much nicer steering wheel to use. I'm not a massive bloke. There's a lot of people that say you have to have your elbow out the window. Maybe it's different with the XS because the seats are slightly different. I don't necessarily feel like I have to have my elbow out there, so that's quite a nice thing to have on there. Wipers, pretty crap. Excuse my language. Rear wiper very much the same. It is noisy. I have done a few bits to it. The next bit on the list I think is to do the sound deadening. I've seen a lot of people do it. It's got carpet and bits around the gear shifters and changes and things, but underneath the rubber mats it's not, it's just metal. So maybe the sound deadening is the next thing that I do. But yeah, for whatever reason, I just like it. I want to do headlight upgrades. I perhaps want to change the roof rack that's on it. As I say, this one's the original Land Rover one, but just a bit tatty, a bit rubbish really. So I might want to change that to maybe a nicer, newer one, spotlights and things like that. Internal lights, I've seen some pretty cool LED ones that you can get. So yeah, there's a few things I want to do to it, but all in all, as much as I've spent a ridiculous amount of money to not get anywhere of any time soon, I just like it. I think it's cool. I'm not sure what it is, but I am pleased with it. I am pleased with it, and I hope to do obviously almost like a series, like a Land Rover Defender series of videos. I'll bring GoPros with me. We go for weekends away. I can show obviously towing videos and things like that. So yeah, I really hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you don't think I'm too much of an idiot for buying this car. And I hope to see you for the next one. Thanks very much.